Thank you, everyone. So we are in the final tunnel of the day, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Grégory Lefkovitch. He's a professor at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, at the Perelman Center, Smart Law Hub, and also one of our academic directors. And he will be doing this session, Regulating and Governing AI and Robotic Agents, with a wonderful panel. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's. Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we are going to discuss regulation, governance, democracy, all these questions that are not that important all together. And we have a fantastic panel to do this. I'm happy to have here Professor Ronald Linus, who is professor in regulation by technology. It's not regulation of technology, but by technology at the Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology and Society. We have also the pleasure to have Claudia Schwalitz, founder and CEO of the Democracy Next. Guillermo Escalin, Executive Director at Data Driven Innovation Initiative, and Patrice Latine, partner at Ernst & Young and AI and Data Solutions Leader. So we'll have a discussion about what should we need to do regarding this potential regulation of AI agents. Does it change anything? And I'm happy to give the floor first to Professor Linus. Please.
Now, I am a professor of regulation by technology, but there we go. Okay, thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to be at a conference, but it's also sort of an issue if you're at the end of the conference, because many people have already connected to the stuff that you want to say. So, Javier, Zijing, Wilson, Sasha, Jordi, thanks for cutting the grass in front of me. Okay, but at least it's not totally nonsense what I'm going to say. There is some connection to what others have said. So the law traditionally distinguishes between agents and objects. And by agents, actually we mean humans. So the law regulates human relationships. In public law, that is between the state and its citizens. In private law, it's between businesses and consumers, and it's between individuals and individuals. And so with objects, it's usually about properties of objects or characteristics of objects, and often the regulation in that field is product safety regulation. So believe it or not, there is regulation about office chairs, and that is particularly about what kind of weight they should be able to carry, etc. Now, both types of things within law require human agency to understand, apply, and enforce what the law requires of them. Okay, so there's nothing new there. But then, over time, we got, at the end of the previous millennium, we got the data protection regulation, and there we saw a focus on data. Data is not a tangible object, but it is an object nevertheless. So the data protection regulation and all the data stuff that came after that basically treated data as an object, and it talks about the effects of data on humans in particular. And it already marks a little bit of a change in thinking, because we have automated decision-making as part of the general data protection regulation, which puts data in a more active role. And that even becomes stronger in the AI Act that we recently had installed. Now, the target of the AI Act is AI systems, which are treated basically as objects as well. So it is about the characteristics of those objects, and the AI Act takes a risk-based product safety approach mainly. So it talks about the design of the systems and the characteristics that they should have. Now, the agents that we're interested in today, like animals before that, challenge the distinction between objects and agents. So, and the reason for that is that, yes, they're not human. They don't have the capacity to understand, apply, and enforce abstract rules and regulations. But on the other hand, they're also not deterministic. They're not totally controllable, and therefore they are slightly different. The autonomy of AI systems, robots, and agents is precisely the point. So that means that if you want to regulate those things, you can do that to some extent by setting design requirements, but we also have to be aware that the system will behave differently once it is out there in the real world. And so that has consequences. Now, what does that mean? In my view, that means that a product safety approach regulation, which the AI Act is not entirely satisfactory. So what we need to do is we need to look at agents and robots from a little bit of a distance and then realize that we have different kinds of regulatory regimes at play all at the same time. So one, we can regulate the design of robots and agents by means of law. But then we also have to realize that robots and agents have real-world effects. And as was said before, they enforce human behavior or augment human behavior, and with great powers that they have comes great responsibility. And that may mean that the agents or robots will have to prevent humans from breaking the law or being non-compliant. So that is a responsibility part. The other thing is that we have to realize that these agents will create effects in the world, and that the effects that are created may require acknowledgement in some cases, but in other cases may also require a kind of responsibility taken on by the robots or agents. And I use these terms interchangeably, but you get the point. And finally, we have the robots themselves, which don't read law, but have to act in a certain way. So we have to regulate the robot's behavior during runtime. And the way to do that is not through law, but rather through software or code. Let me make it a little bit more concrete. So yes, we can set up a set of design properties that we want these agents to adhere to. And so these design requirements are exactly what the AI Act covers. So it talks about training sets, about how machine learning works, how you should be accountable for the training set, that the data has to be representative, etc., to counter bias and discrimination, for instance. And the AI Act does a proper job in that respect, at least certainly for narrow AI. It falls a bit short in more general agents. And I'm not talking about AGI here, so artificial general intelligence, but in a much more restricted form. Secondly, if we want to have robots and agents interacting with us, they, as I said, have a sort of a responsibility to make sure that we stay compliant. And for instance, if you look at self-driving vehicles, if we want humans to be able to take back control of the agent or of the robot, then there is a requirement that you can think of that the robot has to monitor whether we're actually capable of taking back control. And you can do that in different forms, but the robot, that is an example of robots making sure that we comply with all sorts of regulations. In the case of agents, in the case of agents, you can think of bots that make sure that you don't produce hate speech or something. And then the third element is where the robots create effects in the world. And the one thing that comes to mind there immediately is liability. So what happens if accidents still happen? And that is something that needs to be covered. This is not rocket science. The liability directive has been withdrawn from the table. but we need to find a way to assign liability and responsibility for all sorts of actions in the real world. So liability is one, but also things like contracting and positive things need to be handled. As I said, that is not rocket science, but we do have to realize that liability regime not only has an effect after bad things happen, so when damages happen, and taking care of the compensation, but that's the ex post effect, but there's also an ex ante effect that depending on how you arrange liability in an entire sector, you get better or worse products. Now finally we have the tough one, and that is the robots will be among us. And obviously they need to observe all sorts of regulations, so we want self-driving vehicles to observe the traffic laws, but that is sort of obvious. But I think that we also want them to be good citizens. So I don't think we want to have a world where we have robots with flashing lights and sirens signaling that they're approaching. No, the robot has to give way to us humans. And that means that they have to be able to read the room and understand a lot of the things that drives humans and how humans operate. So they will have to have a set of everyday rules that we all understand, and we got the example of the 2-year-old that Sasha talked about. They need to be able to operate on a set of social rules, moral rules, situational rules, behavioral rules, cultural rules, etc. And because we can't specify those precisely for every specific context, they need to be able to some sort of level to interpret those abstract rules and then apply them to a given situation. And lo and behold, that brings us to true agency. So we have to build in mechanisms allowing agents to make sense of the world on the basis of abstract rules. Now, my cat is trying to do that all the time. It tries to read what I want of it, and it understands that I want the cat to be on my lap. And she also tries to read the news to keep up, but this is a very tiresome thing and very difficult for her to do, so that's why she also sleeps a lot during the day. Now, if you like the transmission robots that you saw on the slides, then Matt Dixon is your guy. If you like the cats, then I'm your guy. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this very nice introduction to the kind of conceptual challenges that we may have regarding regulating robotics and AI agents. Maybe it would be interesting, and we have to go a little bit into some example of challenges, problems that we encounter in practice today. So maybe if you want, oh yes, you have the yours, but it's you, but you don't have slides. So maybe Emo, you can start with the kind of situation that you are seeing in the field of smart cities, and then we will continue with Patrice.
We'll do that. So I'm going to be the exception of being a guy who doesn't have slides. So there's always one, you know. I'm the one. So hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Great pleasure to be part of a very interesting day. I spent my working life working in and with cities, so originally as an architect and then with urban technologies. So I use the case example of cities because that's the thing I know of. And especially the connection between cities and in this case AI. But you could extrapolate that to sort of, cities and technology, and you could also extrapolate this, from cities to other organizations, especially in the public sector, I would say. A couple of things about cities. First of all, they are the most resilient human creations. The city of Old Delhi is there. It survived a few imperial rules and different ways of governing, and kept on growing. City of Brussels, here we are, with the medieval history still amongst the city with us. So these are really resilient beings. That also means that cities are basically consist of layers upon layers upon layers of unfinalized plans. Architects have always wanted to build a dream city, and they always failed. Each and every time they always failed, and they always will keep on failing. And that's what we love about cities. We love the fact, the complexity, the messiness, the surprises, kind of stuff we don't quite understand. Why the hell is that there? Of course, it then does create a few problems when we talk about implementing technology in cities. First of all, they are immensely complex. Any comparisons between a city as a company and you can manage it as a company are idiotic, because cities are immensely more complex, because they are society in a condensed form. City is everybody. We are all the city. And that we the people are the main ingredient, and we keep on treating cities in ways which nobody could expect. It also means that when you implement technologies in cities, there's going to be a legacy for your decisions. In the 50s, the car makers lobbied Los Angeles to dig up all the tram rails from Los Angeles. It's a decision which can't be reversed. It would be immensely, unbelievably expensive. And now they live with it in a car congested city. And you know they are sorry about the decision, but you can't take it back. And any technology we now implement in cities will be with us longer than we thought. I mean, we keep on hearing about arcane Windows systems from the 90s still running. It's all true. There's a long tail in technology decisions. And that means that urban technologies need to be upgradable, recyclable, replaceable, and sort of tolerant to change. And that is often the tension between very fast-moving tech, which claims that they have the answer, and the messiness of cities. So let's go to then the topic of the day, which is the fastest scaling technology ever, AI. Cities change fast, technology moves in dog years, and that creates a challenge of speed in our cities. Cities are quite actually keen to embrace new technologies. I mean, in AI, there's lots of buzz about it. You know, productivity increases, redesign and reimagine the way you deliver services and you design services, save costs, and improve the relationship with people, kind of do a much more fine-tuned, much more tailor-made, just right for you kind of service for people. This is what people are expecting in cities. At the same time, the challenge of speed means that we are creating technological solutions which are way more interconnected than we thought. They are creating dependencies between data sets which nobody expected. They are introducing cybersecurity challenges to cities because we connect, especially with agentic technologies, data sets which with connections I don't quite know how they work, opening up new backdoors to urban systems. And of course, they consume massive amounts of energy. So what I want to discuss from a regulatory point of view is not how to regulate the technology itself. It's how or should we regulate the use of technology as part of our cities and our societies. Where and when should we use AI, and when not, and how to define the two. And I think maybe the two biggest questions we should, or three, let's say, put it that way, are first, are there domains which are kind of a no-go zones where you shouldn't implement these technologies, and which are those? Second, indeed, how to deal with the environmental impact which these technologies are putting the pressure on our cities. And third, and nobody actually mentioned it today, how to deal with the monopolistic market creation which we are seeing with the fact that we indeed have 5 companies dominating the global market, 5 companies which are also proven already to be far from immune from geopolitical whimsies of different authoritarian leaders. without going to names here. So how do we deal with that? And I think I would claim that the environmental and political domains are at least as important, if not more important, than technological regulation. So how should we then deal with this? And I close by discussing competencies. And that's where this boils down to. Because technologies and these solutions are fast penetrating our organizations, our cities and other organizations. That means that something which hasn't been the core competence of our organizations has to be a core competence from now on. I mean, we used to, as I said, I have an architecture background, so it's clear that any city has an urban planning department who are very knowledgeable in urban planning. They have probably an energy management department, they have educational departments, etc. And then they have an IT department. But this is not a job for the IT department, because all these other departments have to be far more knowledgeable about technology than they are now. It has to be a core competence across all the other sectors. And in practice, then, there are a couple of ways to manage this, but first, just a couple of thoughts about when not to use AI. And I think there's one obvious clear case. That is when we are making decisions about people. Surely we can use AI to augment the decision-making process. Of course, the problem with that is that an AI-augmented decision-making process, as we all know when we be using these systems, is very lucrative. It looks very finalized. It looks very finished. It's hard to be, you know, in opposition to the stuff which its systems spit out. But because explainable and transparent AI currently is impossible, the technology in itself doesn't allow explainability. That means that when we make decisions about, let's say, people's livelihood, social security services, etc., there must be a human in the loop and in the center. And we probably shouldn't use AI augmentation to many of those situations. Then when we do use AI, I close with the 3 ways with which we could do it better in our cities. First, connect the change makers, connect the people who must be more knowledgeable in the organization. So basically that means a policy to implement AI in a way which is mandated from the top but built up from the bottom, so that people who work with this tech learn from each other. Second, use urban experimentation, implement, iterate, and only then implement the solutions finally as a policy or permanent solution to the city. Don't do it the other way around. And third, develop tools and services which help the organization to manage this. And I take a case example from London. London Office for Technology and Innovation helps the London boroughs through tools like AI use case template, London data ethics service, etc., and which cut across all the different departments and sort of increase the level of core competence in the organization. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then we move to Patrice, maybe to bring a little bit what are the specific challenges that we have with agents. You have the floor. Yeah. No, we'll. Can you? It's Patrice now. No. Okay. Well, okay. Well, so let's do this like that way. It makes it's a little bit less connected as a floor. But then we will first move to democracy and then go back to the challenges of AI agents. So I think it's a very AI agents and democracy. It's a very interesting topic. So I mean, I was just We were just chatting before this panel about this work by Cesar Hidalgo, trying to build augmented democracy or by fine-tuning AI agents to take more regularly decisions, and that would be the democracy according to a specific kind of algorithmic perspective. A lot of people today from AI, when I see them in the journal, they are coming from AI or sponsor or head of AI company, but they are with a saw chain most of the time, not with a computer. So what is the challenges that we have there for democracy?
Yeah, some small questions there. I think I do have some connections though to what was just being said, so we'll make it flow. Thanks very much for having me here today. My name is Claudia Schwallis, and I'm the founder and CEO of Democracy Next. I'm also an advisor to the Data Tank, the UN Democracy Fund, and the MIT Center for Constructive Communication, and I co-lead the DelibTech, Deliberation and Technology Network. So the perspective that I'm bringing here is that I think around all of these questions about how should we be regulating AI and robots, public deliberation can't be an afterthought in this discussion, that AI governance needs democratic and not just technocratic governance. And so the organization that I'm leading and the lens through which I'm looking at this, we're an international research and action institute that's focused on shifting who has power and how are we taking decisions together, drawing mostly on these three ancient democratic principles of sortition, meaning randomly selecting decision makers, deliberation, creating structured spaces for informed decision making, and rotation, meaning that we should be rotating in those positions of representing others and being represented in turn. And these ancient practices are what enable people to engage with complexity, to exercise collective intelligence, and to find common ground with one another. So I wanted to open my reflections today with a quote from the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman from a speech that he gave in 1955 to the American Academy of Sciences at Caltech. And this was in the context of talking about the atomic bomb and some of the after effects and the reflections around this whole context and situation. And he said in that speech that scientific knowledge is an enabling power to do either good or bad, but it does not carry instructions on how to use it. And I think that 70 years later, we're having a rather similar conversation about the nature of AI. Except that this time, this technology is actually developing faster, we're deploying it more widely, and the people who are building it are also trying to figure out how do we govern it. And I think that the main point that I want to get across today is that we cannot let AI governance become a purely technocratic exercise. This is a democratic question, not just a technical one. So I'll lay out three kind of contextual factors before offering a few ideas on this. So one is that complexity with consequences. So drawing on the quote that Feynman said, science can tell us if we do this, this will happen, but it cannot answer the question, do we want this to happen? And so this is why we need both that technical complexity, but on its own, we're dealing with questions that actually have profound societal, values-based consequences. The second, I won't belabor this point because I'm in a room with AI experts, but there is an unprecedented speed at which these technologies are being developed, going from none to millions of users in a few months with ChatGPT and other technologies. The kind of questions about how do we regulate this are already outdated by the time we have the new models. So it does require a new thinking about how do we govern and how do we also involve the public in deliberating about these types of questions. And then third, there is a knowledge asymmetry that the people with the deepest knowledge on this are small in number and they're concentrated in a few of the AI labs that are developing these technologies. And the people who are regulating these questions in government, but also amongst the wider public, just do not have the same level of expertise to be dealing with the complexity of these issues. So I'll offer three ideas today about how we might approach these challenges. And I don't have all the answers, I don't think anybody does, but these are just some suggestions of things to be thinking about. One is that we've been seeing some interesting experimentation about public deliberation within AI labs themselves. So Anthropic had a process around a kind of constitutional AI. OpenAI had an open call for 10 grants to develop more democratic tools for using AI tools for democracy. And at the same time, these experiments have also posed a few issues. So the ones that Anthropic did, for example, relied on a sample of 1,000 Americans who already had AI knowledge, and it only refers to like a very specific part of how they're doing reinforcement learning, but doesn't concern anything else in terms of developing their models or their processes. So the scope is rather narrow. Meta has also put forth some proposals around doing community forums around generative AI. But the kind of, while these have been good, they've also been problematic in three ways in terms of who is setting the agenda. It's a very top-down agenda setting within the AI labs, and it's being limited really to questions about how could we use these technologies for democracy rather than how could we actually use public deliberation for more democratic development of them in the first place. There's a second question of where's the power. These have been very advisory processes, and the decision-making has ultimately rested with those who are wielding the most power. And then there are numerous process limitations like the one I just alluded to about this often being these kind of democratic experiments being limited to usually American samples, even though these are global technologies, people only with AI knowledge rather than a wider public, and so on. And so can deliberative processes really be done by the organizations that are developing these technologies, or is this really just a sophisticated form of legitimacy seeking? I think there's a question there. But on a more optimistic note, and kind of linking actually to what was being said earlier, I think there's been some interesting developments when it comes to AI localism. So first, just to kind of give a sense of this AI localism versus globalism conversation. So I think because of the global nature of the applications of these technologies, many people have jumped to a lot of the global solutions. So we have the OECD's AI principles, UNESCO has developed ethical guidelines, the UN has various advisory bodies, and it's not to say that we don't need these things. There's also others who have suggested we need a global citizens assembly on AI governance. And while that sounds really nice, we've seen from the global citizens assembly that took place on climate change a few years ago that trying to address these questions at that global level leaves the recommendations at such a high level prescriptive, or not prescriptive, but high level set of principles that are very far away from the actual applications. And these international bodies also have no enforcement mechanisms, and these are merely, what's the word I'm looking for? They're non-binding recommendations that are coming out of them. So, but I think there's a lot of promise on the AI localism side of things, where we've seen quite a lot of state, local, other sub-jurisdictional bodies doing interesting things like data assemblies, citizens assemblies around AI governance, and other kinds of deliberative processes that have been involving broadly representative groups of the public, creating the spaces for them to become more informed on the issues, but also linking them to very specific applications of how AI is going to be used in cities, for instance. And so I think that this has more promise for a few reasons. That one, people have more contextual expertise. How AI might be applied in Amsterdam or in rural Wyoming might be a little bit different depending on what's going on in those places. Secondly, trust is also being built through proximity, that people are more likely to be trusting the decisions that come out in a place where they're more linked actually to the application of those decisions. Third is this idea that Stefan Verhulst has been working on at NYU about the social license. So creating a kind of social contract around how we might be using data in a certain context. And fourth is that at that scale, we can also have greater speed and experimentation linked up to this challenge around the speed of some of this technology being developed. And then finally, the third point that I wanted to talk about is around the need for a new social contract for data. So this also draws quite a bit on the work of the Data Tank and NYU GovLab and Stefan Verhulst, who I think has been making a very compelling argument that for a long time, the kind of open data movement has been calling for the fact that we need open data for open science, to spread knowledge, to increase scientific discovery and so on. But the AI era has also posed a bit of a paradox in the sense that on the one hand, these AI labs are using and scraping open data to build various models. So there's a need, they're being exploited in the sense of people who have been putting forth that data access are not getting any benefit flows back to them. And on the other hand, there's been a kind of closure off of a lot of public databases because this is happening. So what we're seeing is a little bit of what he calls a data winter, where at a time where we actually need kind of more broad access to data more than ever, we're seeing a retraction from that movement. And I think that that open versus closed distinction is not necessarily helpful at the moment, and this idea of actually having a social contract where we're developing a governance mechanism around groups of data to decide modular access about who can access this, under what conditions, to what level of granularity, and having governance mechanisms that sit around it offer a little bit of a kind of way forward around these challenges today. So to close, I wanted to come back to the speech by Richard Feynman, where he also made another quote saying that we also need to, I have one slide missing that I added in too late, but so I don't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but basically it's really along the lines of also remembering that we're in a space of like, science also encourages us to be doubting, questioning, moving forward. So it's also about saying that AI governance isn't about trying to slow down innovation, that it's about making sure that as we innovate, we're preserving democratic agency, the ability of people to shape the technologies that are shaping their lives. The technical experts can tell us what's possible, but we need public deliberation to tell us what is desirable. So, thank you.
So coming back to the use case, and thank you for this inspiring presentation. We'll go back in the discussion about this aspect, but regarding where we are in the implementation and kind of specific problems that we may have that may require some additional or different perspective on regulation. What can you tell us about that, Patrice?
Yes, surely. So first of all, I would like to say that I'm very delighted to be with you today. I'm a practitioner for more than 25 years in AI and data, thanks to Professor Bersini, amongst many people. So actually at UI, we design, we build, we deploy, we govern AI systems for mainly business applications, but we are also very deeply committed in sustainable growth platforms, and especially with United Nations, for instance, in education, environment, and entrepreneurship. So what we see is actually, and then I'm looking at the video that is not running. That's a little bit sad. That if AI can actually...
There's always this fear that machines are taking over.
Robots never get tired, sick, or need meal breaks.
The new age of automation is here.
Does that mean we are powerless?
Work might be changing, but we can shape that change.
Well, actually...
When people and technology come together, limitless opportunities can emerge. But automation will only reach its full potential.
Thank you. So actually, this is, I will shortcut a bit the presentation, but actually this campaign was launched a couple of years ago to build trust in AI, in virtual robots in that case, with travelers passing by in a couple of international airports like Frankfurt, Toronto, Amsterdam. It was launched there. But maybe you've seen 3 weeks ago, company iX Technologies has announced the release of the first humanoid robot called Neo for doing laundry and cleaning at home. So when you see how fast it goes, we typically say that how do we move from the impossible to the unstoppable? And so, yep. Hello. Oops, that's backwards. Allez, voilà. So, talking a lot about AI agents, AI and robotic agents today, of course, there's a topologies about that to explain, okay, what it is, what type of AI agents are we talking about, and it goes very fast from knowledge assistant to more or less autonomous agents, and even we're talking more and more about teams of agents, workforce, agentic workforces, and companies like mine, we have a lot of very robust responsible AI framework where we define purposeful design for AI systems, where we develop agile governance frameworks and vigilant supervision around with many principles. We see current approaches in regulations where you have risk proportionate regulations like the EU AI Act, really like you need to evaluate the risk and see how do you mitigate according to the level of risk. And you see also very domain-specific regulations, like you mentioned already. And actually, the recipe is to combine both. But there's something in the middle when I'm, as a practitioner, I need for my clients to assess the risks of AI systems, agentic AI systems nowadays even, because they want to implement something by design or it's already in production. What are we talking about? What are the properties of an AI agent? And that is where we really need to be a little bit more explicit when we talk about AI agents. And I found quite recently a very interesting article from Kazizadeh and Gabriel, who have actually characterized 4 dimensions of AI agents or robotic agents. So it's quite general. So these dimensions are autonomy, efficacy, goal complexity, and generality. And I added a 5th one for this presentation that I call the social alignment. A social alignment being that an AI, agentic system, should actually align with the human values and social norms. We have discussed that a lot today. Autonomy is pretty obvious, but it's not only autonomy. Characterizing these dimensions along 5 different levels. So, of course, no autonomy is no agent, like no goal, no agent neither. But when we move, for instance, in goal complexity, complexity increases of an AI agent when you have multiple goals and even dividing in sub-goals to reach a specific, or to solve a specific problem. When we talk about efficacy, it's really about the way an AI agent perceive and causally impact its environment. And its environment can be simulated, like in a game, can be mediated, where still the human is in between the environment and the robot, and obviously physical. And generality is the capability of transfer knowledge from one domain to another, or to be capable to handle different domains together. So it sounds maybe a little bit conceptual, so I took 3 examples. One is in education. You've probably heard about the case of Camingo, that is an AI tutor and teaching assistant. Quite interesting because it takes the children by the hand in education together with the teacher to adapt with the inclusiveness that is required in the classroom, but also with the capabilities of moving the different levels according to different, in regards to different disciplines, mathematics, science, literature, etc. And it's very advanced in terms of AI agents behind the scene. In the domain of mobility, you may remember in this room the project of SAMI from Steve MIVB. That was about the autonomous bus. It was tested in a park, and then the project discontinued mainly because of COVID. But we see, many of us know about Waymo, but I've seen that there's a project now for robobus, not only robotaxi, so in partnership with Toyota. So also a very interesting case because it touched a lot, every one of us as citizens. And finally, in health or medicine, last week there was the Congress of Orthopedics in Paris. My son was there, that's why I know. And actually, not because he's a medicine, he's a student, but it was really stunning for the whole audience to see this, the last release of this Maser X robot that is assisting the surgeon in doing spine surgery in ultimate precision and stability on the bone of the patient. So these 3 examples, we can characterize them again inspired by this article that deeply invite you to read. To qualify, and I'm just conscious of time, just qualify just a few elements that characterize these three examples. In terms of education, if you take the social alignment, obviously, for our children, we want to be sure that the AI agent respect the teaching norms, the ethics, privacy, also inclusiveness in the diversity of the classroom. And therefore, the goal can be conceptual to put in place such governance framework, but the goal is that you can really, now that you see that it's level 4 of social alignment, trying to find the appropriate action so that you don't under-regulate the dangerous and don't over-regulate the harmless. And in that case, for instance, we would recommend to do a continuous bias auditing of the system. If we take the example of mobility, of course, in terms of goal complexity, but also in terms of efficacy, you interact with the environment in a kind of irreversible way. So you need also to manage the navigation, the safety of pedestrians, and the comfort of the passengers, which was the struggle of the SAMI project, for instance. And so you need real-time operational monitoring, and that talks a lot to the practitioners to put in place the governance on top of the AI agents release by release. And finally, for the health and the medical maser robot, the goal complexity is very, very high. I mean, it's just level 3 because in the scale of the scientific who've made the paper, goal complexity can go, of course, much higher. But again, here, the level of precision and the level of stability that is required for spine surgery, in that case, requires not continuous governance, continuous monitoring, but along the protocol of medical protocol practices. You need to have the step-by-step in interoperability with the doctor to make sure that it authorizes the next step in the surgery and validate the result. So all in all, you see with these three examples, I hope that, yes, it's complex. We need to bring structure, and we need to see how we can make these agentic profiles in order to really derive a concrete action plan, which is a lot lacking nowadays, at least in the industry I'm currently working for, and where I think these kind of publications make things very concrete. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We have some time for discussion now. And so you know that we have already quite a lot of regulation regarding the digital world in general and AI in particular. In the past, the idea was that law brings certainty. So it's the thing that we have law, we can rely on that, and then it will not change every day. No, we have the AI Act. It's not yet completely implemented. We will have an omnibus on Wednesday with some change for this one and the GDPR, etc. So we are in an environment with a lot of norms, including legal norms. Is there something specific with agent that will require basically Agent Act? Or the capability and the legal tools that we have already are good enough? So maybe we can start here from Ronald. Because you were, I understand a little bit critical about the approach of the AI Act. So do we need a new act to address this the kind of problem that we may have when tomorrow we will have, I don't know, buy for me, you know, this application that they try to push, buy for me something, then it will go automatically find the right place to buy what, etc., and then you will get delivered at home. Do we need a new regulation for this kind of application? Not. What's your idea?
This is actually a very difficult question. So let me give a couple of quasi-random things. One, it is generally a bad idea to have technology-specific regulation. So an agent act or a robot act is not really a good idea, because what is the problem with a robot per se? So you need to have a specific problem that you want to target with regulation, and you have to have an idea on how to regulate that. So what amazes me about the AI Act is why the AI Act is incredibly complex and stupid beast, if you ask me, because it tries to do too much at the same time in a disorganized way. But one of the strands in the AI Act is that if you look at Annex 3, which defines the high-risk systems, then most of them deal with decisions about individuals. I don't understand why that is singled out as a topic in the AI Act, because as a citizen, I frankly don't care whether I'm mistreated by an AI system, by a biased civil servant, by the throw of dice or anything. So the topic that you should regulate, in my view, is decision-making, fairness in decision-making about individuals. Now, if you do that, then automatically AI systems are part of that. So if we have a problem with robots or agents, then we have to figure out what that problem is. And I think that I can envision that there would be a regulation in the future, but you can also take a step back and say, well, if we go back to the high-level expert group AI ethics guide, then you could say human-centric AI that is robust, is legally compliant with legal regulation, and a bunch of other things, then what an agent should comply with is already there, and leave the implementation of what that means to the developers in conjunction with society deciding what we actually want to have out there in the real world. So I would say no, not at this stage, new regulation.
Everybody agree with this perspective, or do you have a different point of view? No more regulation?
We have enough, I think.
Enough?
It just need to be concrete, more concrete, and talk to the people who want to use and want to own the AI agents or the application. And then what we see also is that, like you say, it depends on which level we are looking at the regulation. It's really domain specific in many cases, if not in all cases. And so that should start from there.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with the something which is in such a fast state of development. It's, I mean, what would you actually regulate? Because we don't know where the end game is.
Okay, but if we wait until the end game is that, is the end of the game. Maybe. Do we need to? So of course we can discuss together, but I mean, to decide on do we need a new legislation or not, and what should it be? It's a kind of democratic question. So do you think that we should ask the question to some people, or that we need to imagine new ways to build rules that does not exist so far? I mean, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm less of an expert on whether we need a new Agent Act or not. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I think it's in line with why my instinct is that having decision making happening at levels that are closer to actual application. Like a school might come up with its own set of policies that are different than in a hospital or at the city level for certain kinds of decisions about how AI agents might be deployed. So to me, it makes more sense that we actually have mechanisms in those spaces that are closer to how people might be actually using some of these things rather than the more abstract level, which might also then have an impact on curtailing some of the innovation that we see.
So I see a clear thing where we can involve society in a democratic way. And what's the Apple TV series that was mentioned, the Happy Guy thing? I'm currently watching, oh, that's stupid. But anyway, there's a constant recurring scene where you have this delivery robot that is being kicked by one of the main characters. And that is exactly the example that I try to explain in my sort of thing, that do we want a society where that delivery robot takes precedence, or do we want to have a society where the delivery robot stops for anybody or anything crossing? That is a very concrete question that has a totally different effect on how agents will be developed and deployed.
So thank you very much. I would like to turn now to the public to see if you have some questions or remarks about what was discussed now. Yes?
So I just want to follow up on something you said, Ronald. Your approach of not putting in technology-specific laws, and I kind of get that, but doesn't it kind of rely on the fact that the technology providers themselves actually care?
What? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because, I mean, there's multiple layers in what we're both saying.
I get that, but sorry, I just find that the likes of Meta, OpenAI and so on, if you don't provide them with a strict regime of things, you cannot rely on them to do it themselves.
No.
Because they don't care and they will take the fines because it's petty cash to them.
Yes, no. I totally agree. I mean, so and that is less sort of okay. So I'm not advocating that there should not be a regulation, but you should be very careful in how you frame the target of your regulation, because companies will exactly try to circumvent anything that you put there as the target. So if you call something an AI system, then suddenly the things that people are deploying are no longer AI systems because they would fall under the regulation. But what I'm saying is that you better start from a real problem, a harm that you try to prevent, and then anything that causes that harm is under the regulation, rather than pointing out we're going to deal with three-legged tables, because then people will create four-leg tables with the same problem.
I have another question. So we've been talking for like today about the fact that we want to have AI is biased and that we want to build with more culture and appropriativeness. But how are we able to do that if most of the company they're actually building those foundational model are, let's say, US or centric, or in China, if we're not regulating at the global level? But also when I was thinking that we've managed to maybe stop atomic bomb and also space invasion in a way, like as a global, because it's a threat for human, and this is like the whole thing, like human-centric approach. So is there a way that we could potentially as a global level regulate the impact of tech of like for human, or you think it's too utopian?
I don't know. Well, I address that from a bit of a different angle. I don't think we should aim for global regulation because nobody who can implement that. But that doesn't stop us from using the, the European Union is a massive market, and so it's a regulatory superpower, and it can't be ignored by any company which wants to sell anything here. So if we implement something here, it easily becomes a global regulation. That's the way it works. And there has just been a case where just last week, where the first case where Meta has been sanctioned for ripping off a book in Germany. So there's been a case where a case has been won at law that the copyrighted work has been stolen to teach AI. So there are ways to do this, and I think Europe should use the superpower it has, but we also should, and I think especially in the case of creative industries, we should really go and be pretty aggressive about protecting the intellectual property and just the creativeness of humans. At the moment, the AI agents are flooding different streaming platforms with 50,000 new pieces of so-called music every day. And these systems are crashing under the load, which also in the case of Spotify, I don't cry about it, but there are also artist-driven platforms which are crashing under the load of AI creative music. So that's a particular domain where I'm pretty passionate that we definitely should use the superpower we have and try to stop the ripping of people's creative property.
So maybe to pick up on the last part of the question in particular, is it kind of utopian in some way to think that some global regulation might be possible? I think in a way, yes, in the sense of that we already have different forms of global level guidelines, like some of the ones I was alluding to. And not that we don't need those, like I used to work at the OECD, I've worked on good practice principles. Those things do kind of have an influence, but at the same time, there's no enforcement mechanism behind them. And so I do think that EU level is interesting because there is actually lawmaking body, there are law enforcement mechanisms that are possible, and actually at the EU level we've seen some interesting democratic innovation happening as well. So there have been now 11 citizens panels that the European Commission has organized with randomly selected groups of people stratified to be broadly representative of the EU that have deliberated on all sorts of topics, but they have tended to be on things like, for example, one this past weekend was deliberating on intergenerational fairness, other ones have been on food waste, on pollinators. So these are perhaps also important problems, but I think that some of these kind of meaty, complex, controversial and important problems probably should be higher on the agenda for what are EU bodies also convening citizens across the EU to be deliberating on, to have that injection of diversity so that the people who are involved in those decisions are a little bit more diverse than perhaps, for example, even the people who are here in this room, who are nonetheless not fully representative of the diversity of people who are impacted by the decisions of the decisions.
There is a last question, maybe.
Yes, I'll try to keep it short so we can close. I just wanted to say that I also studied in Tilburg and law, and I really like the take of not making legislation for each technology, because before they were focused on VPNs, and now everyone is into SASIs, for example. But if the digital omnibus comes into place and destroys GDPR, destroys the AI Act, and we don't make legislation on new technologies, how can the law and even the EU really promote sustainable innovation and avoid chaos?
That's a good one.
Is this going to be a Tilburg discussion? No, I think so. I want to tie two things together, so the previous question and this one. So I think, to me, it doesn't make sense to aim for global regulation. Look at COP, that was mentioned earlier today. Global consensus doesn't arise. But we have something called the Brussels effect that was alluded to before. We have a power within Europe, but we need to keep our back straight and enforcement. And the thing that is lacking significantly is strict enforcement of the rules that we have. So if you say the GDPR is going down, that's going down because of two things. One is enforcement, and the second is the omnibus package is watering down the things that we have. No. Keep your eye on the ball. We can make a difference. And the other thing that we need to do is invest in technology in Europe. That's been said before here as well. We need to build our own critical infrastructure, and AI foundational models are, as far as I'm concerned, critical infrastructure.
Patrice?
No, nothing to add. I think indeed we see though the standards on ISO, Sense&Elect, etc., but it takes time to put that in place. So definitely agree with you.
Okay. No more question. I think we will continue the discussion with maybe a coffee a little bit later.
Just have one little question. I will be really brief. Do you think that agents pose new challenges that are not posed or posed by the other AI systems? And if so, if we do not need a new regulations, then we let the judges regulate, because conflict will emerge at one point or another. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, who wants to take this one?
Maybe I can reflect on that one. So I think AI is a very broad domain, and AI agents, and as I try to say, the topologies, you see things getting more complex in terms of goals, in terms of autonomy, in terms of capability to generalize different domains, etc. Like we see with GPT, GPT-5, it's even addressing more bias or not. But all in all, it's surrounded by common principles. The question is how to understand how it evolves and how we can actually make sure that we need to manage the different properties along these AI agents and their evolution. I don't currently think that we need something new that characterize agents. Agents exist for how many years? I mean, 50 years, 60 years? Some people in the room knows. We've been working on that for so many years. Now the question is, how do we use that us as citizens or in organizations, etc. And that is the big change, not anymore in the labs only.
Well, there is, but it's not a new issue. Liability is really an issue. It is a solvable issue. We can, but at the moment, because software, there's no liability for software. The industry has taken care of that to keep that out of the liability schemes, and that is an issue because you will have enormous fights about who is liable for damages if an agent, let's say a robot, causes damages. The legal system, the courts will solve that problem, but it will take maybe too much time, and therefore regulation might be a quicker route to get where we want to be.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your ideas about this topic. I think we are not at the end of the regulatory, let's say, travel that we are doing in Europe for a long time now. Thank you to all people that that contribute to the discussion, and so I will ask everybody to clap.